after this panel, but I'm very pleased to welcome you to Funging the Non-fungible, laying down the law on NFTs. We're going to have a very exciting session today with four fantastic speakers. Professor Burkhard Schafer from the University of Edinburgh, Dr. Alexandra Giannopoulou from the University of Amsterdam, Dr. Andres Guadamuz from the University of Sussex, and Dr. Sean Thomas from the University of York. The format is that they'll each speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, and the panelists might ask each other some clarifications after each presentation, but we're going to have a discussion and questions from the audience at the end of the panel, if that's okay. So very excited to hand over to our first speaker. Burkhard, over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Smita. Also for stepping in so quickly after some others got COVID-related speaking problems, and hope they are all going to be better. Share screen is now what I'll try to do exactly. So, up. And slideshow, play from start. Okay, welcome also on my behalf and on behalf of the Decade team. Just a little bit of background for this event. It is part of a 3-week art event that takes place at Insapce in Edinburgh. And if you are in Edinburgh physically, then you are very welcome to go there. And what you can do there is to create together, collaboratively with one of our two local artists, your own NFT, your own digital artwork, mint it, put it in a wallet. We help people to do this, explain to them the process, and it invites people to reflect a bit about concepts of ownership, concepts of control, what it means to have a wallet for those of you who didn't have that sort of thing before. And it is all part of the larger Decade project, the decentralized economy that this is part of. And when we discussed setting up this event, we entered also some really interesting ethical discussions. Most of us are in varying degrees skeptical, concerned also about NFTs. Some of us see potential there, definitely, but we also have some worries. And then we had a question, is that appropriate as part of an open event where everyone can come in, where maybe the support we can give to people is limited, to introduce them like that to this technology? Is it, as one analogy put it, as the equivalent of a criminological research project on drug abuse in inner city Edinburgh, where we hand out small bags of hash so as an entry-level drug, and then find out how people cope with it and if they move on to harder stuff. So we did have quite a bit of ethical discussion, and we hope to write that up as well, also for those of you who think of using similar things as part of their teaching, for instance. Some really good, some interesting questions came up in that context, which we hope also to explore a bit more. One of the things that NFTs enabled us to do was to mitigate that risk to a certain extent, because those that you will mint as part of this project can't be sold. They can't be exchanged for fungible tokens, for bitcoins or anything like that, because we didn't want to enter in this sort of speculative investment craziness that is around us. So the type of title that you get from it might be slightly different than the one that you would normally expect. And that was exactly what we tried to explore, the feeling of possession and what that means. So that's a little bit for the background. And for the rest, I want to talk a little bit about my own take at the moment, a sort of small project within Decade that I'm interested in on how NFTs can be used. And that is together with my PhD student, Ronnie Bogani, and a couple of other folks. Ronnie owns a bit of real estate or unreal estate in Decentraland, where events can take place. It's itself a decentralized metaverse. And that is for us a little bit the test bed for this. And Just a bit again of background. As we all know, the COVID pandemic has severely affected sectors that rely on income on performances. Applies obviously to musicians and other stage performers, and it also applied to the charitable sector, which very often uses live performances as fundraiser. I mean, I myself used to organize live Kayleys for Amnesty International in Edinburgh. That was one of our main money generating event. All that disappeared for 2 years, and one of the responses obviously was to go online, to do these things now in an online environment. So I'm interested in particular in this intersection between charitable fundraising, music performers, and how they coped with COVID, and how they developed mitigation strategies through online events. So moving events online mitigated these consequences, but only to a certain extent, only with certain limitations. And in particular, one of the difficulties from the music performer side is that you don't just make money from the tickets, for instance. Quite a lot of income is generated through sales and transactions that are surrounding the event. Buying drinks in the break, for instance, very important in the festival income source. Buying memorabilia, and I will come to them in a second. But also the problem that if you normally go with your family to one of these events, you have to pay for 5 tickets. And if you just do it from your computer in your living room, well, then at best you pay for 1 entrance ticket. So again, a massive loss in income streams here. So that is some of the feedback, some of the things that we find as a problem for performing artists. For charities, there is the additional problem that they are already fighting a trust problem. A couple of high-profile scandals, misuse of funds. People like to see, they want to be certain that the money they give ends up for the cause that they donated it for, and there had been quite a couple of issues here in our environment. And now you move online, and online is in itself an inherently non-trustworthy environment. So at a time when they already struggle to generate income, when more charitable donations are needed because the needs are greater, that creates additional problems. So that is, if you like, the problem setting. And I want to dive in a little bit on the sale of memorabilia side, because that is for me where I think the NFTs comes in most. I'm the proud owner of a CD signed by Anna-Sophie Mutter and of a T-shirt signed by Metallica. And if the way our pension funds are further evolving or devolving the way we see at the moment, and our employers stealing our retirement money, then I really, really have to hope that they do extremely well in Antiques Roadshow 2035 or thereabouts. But obviously I didn't buy them as an investment. And I also, when I got the signed copy of Anna-Sophie Mutter's CD, I was under no illusion that I acquired the copyright in the work. Most certainly not. And I also did not acquire the copyright in the artwork on the Metallica t-shirt. I understand these ground rules very, very intuitively. There's no question about it. And at the same time, the signature on it, on the one hand, they increase the value. They make them unique. They make this CD different from any other, otherwise physically identical CD of the concert. But they make them particularly important for me. So it might well be that they will one day make more money because they are a signed copy. But what is important for me is something different. It means that I now have a enhanced memory of the event, a physical proof that I was really there, that I can show if I had grandchildren, this is how your granddad looked like when he thought a long ponytail was really, really cool. That is something that makes them non-fungible in a way, because no one else who might acquire this work will have the same connection to the event. It will signify something else for them. And that is for me, in a way, where I think the NFT idea or the concept can come in, can to a certain extent fill some of these gaps. Both for the charities, because it can link the donation to the eventual use of the money, but also potentially helping these artists. So one of the things that Ronnie and his crew did on Nakatomi Palace in Decentraland, they organized a benefit concert, We Can Be Heroes, that raised a small amount of money, not particularly huge amounts of money, but one of the things people got in exchange for donating, and this is a charitable donation, that is after all the idea, you give to a cause you would anyway give to, you also get an NFT in exchange as a unique token that essentially proves you were there, you were at the event, and actually you cared enough about the cause that you made a donation. So sometimes people say an NFT, the metadata there, I think that is what Andres will also partly argue, is a little bit or nothing else but a receipt. And I would say, well, yes, quite possibly, but that is sometimes something that we want. It is, if you like, nothing more, potentially like a beautiful looking receipt of the donation to charity, but that still fulfills an important memory function, potentially, an emotive function for me. And we could potentially extend this notion that's one of the things I'm considering, using this NFT as event merchandise, as a documented memory trace. And one possibility, for instance, would be if it's an event for the Woodland Trust, for a charity that looks after woodland in the UK, you could get a NFT tree that represents one of these trees that will be planted outside in the real world, and you can trace the money that you donated, potentially at least, right to the point of sale of some seeds. So there is also this possibility to address some of the concerns about use of charitable funds that come with this. So in a way, if we treat NFTs as a sort of merchandise, as a proof you were there, and this is an event that is unique, it is over, you were at the last performance of the Beatles, this proves it, I think we find a less problematic understanding of what's going on there. That still causes a couple of, I think, interesting legal issues, depending on how we conceptualize what exactly is going on there. Is this, legally speaking, just a charitable donation, a gift, and the NFT is the gift certificate? Or is it, after all, more like a jumble sale when I go to my local church and buy their cake or their homemade marmalade, and I get in exchange something of value, a good, that has implications for the validity of a contract. Gifts are treated in some jurisdictions very differently from a contract of sale. There are not contracts under English law, so we might wonder already what is exactly going on in this case. And it has potentially very different tax implications, because a charitable donation under the UK law, I can tax deduce as well, and the charity benefits from it, and that might already be different if the underlying contract is one of sale. So here we need to, I think, understand better how the law should conceptualize it, and the consequences are both for the validity of this contract, but also for the tax implications. A charitable donation is treated differently in tax than a sale of a product. We could ask, are these NFTs linked to Realtree? Lots of people would like to see their money not support the administration side of a charity, but the actual tree, that is one of the things we could consider. We could consider adding additional value. I'm not interested in the tree, I'm interested in the forest that will grow from the tree. So can I maybe link my NFT to those other people who donated on that event, and I can see a small forest growing, just as a sort of additional value that we can create for this. So that's one of these things that we explored, and then again, following up from this in a way, and these are for me totally open questions. I think they pose interesting research question, and someone who understands tax law better than me And that is a very low bar. It applies probably to 99.5% of the world's population. So someone who understands tax law better could look at this. One news item recently, HMRC, that is our tax authorities, seized NFTs. So there was a business that was selling, investing in NFTs that had tax liabilities, and Her Majesty's office seized them. And so we can ask, well, actually, what does this mean to seize this type of digital asset? And also, what on earth are they doing with it? With money, we know that. And if they had seized physical paintings or other valuable goods, they would probably have sold them. But what exactly is a government agency going to do with these digital objects if they now represent, to a certain extent, a tax liability? Would they have to sell them? If that happens on a large scale, would that affect the value? Because suddenly the market gets flooded from seized NFTs from the tax office. So I don't know, honestly, what they are doing with it, but I thought it was an interesting question. And if you follow that one further, at the moment, if you own valuable art, and at least according to the market, some NFTs are valuable, and you die, then your heirs might have quite some tax liability. And one way to deal with that tax liability under UK law is to give some of the art in lieu of money. And we have lots and lots of artworks in our national galleries exhibited that are essentially tax debt. And I have no idea if the same would apply to NFTs that had accumulated in the estate of someone. I have no idea how they would be treated under inheritance law. And that's why I'm just throwing these things out there. I think there are some benevolent, unproblematic uses, otherwise we wouldn't have done our experiment. But I do think even these raise some interesting legal issues, and tax and the tax repercussions are amongst them. And that was my 15 minutes. Thank you.
Wonderful, Burkhard. Thank you so much for keeping to time. This makes my job easier, and I don't have many jobs to do this morning. Okay, unless the panelists have any questions or clarifications for Burkhard, I would like to pass over the mic to Alexandra.
Okay, you can all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, what if I do this? Yes. Okay, so hello everyone. I'll try to keep an eye on the time. Cool. So I will be presenting today a specific aspect of NFTs, mostly sticking with the intermediation that is happening currently in the NFT world, and I will give a brief explanation in the beginning of what NFTs are, but I would leave this job done best by Andres with his better NFT acquisitions and experimentations. So a little bit of an introductory on myself and our project. So I'm part of the Blockchain Society Policy Research Lab. It's a Universiy funded 5-year project. This is the last year of our project, so we are kind of starting to wrapping up. One of the things that we addressed was also what started as blockchain and copyright implications, and then focused on specifically NFTs. We recently published an article that is coming out next month, and it's already available on SSRN. So what I'm going to be talking about is, first of all, what NFTs are and how they are created and traded, the relationship between NFTs, copyright, and the artwork, and of course some considerations about our future of this technology. So a little flashback to 20 years ago. when everyone was talking, myself included, about how do we coincide the exclusive rights, specifically in copyright, with this abundance of information that could circulate online. Now we've come full circle in seeing that digital scarcity is back, and we're trying to figure out how to actually implement it within our understandings of intellectual property and other types of law. We've seen a lot of different NFTs come and go without really an explanation or multiple explanations of what they are. So first of all, simply to say that NFTs are NFTs are non-fungible tokens. They are so cryptographic tokens, digitally scarce units of value, the properties of which are prescribed through computer code. They come in various flavors and shades and types. They can be tokens, they can be qualified as securities, assets, etc. They constitute essentially a digital representation of something on a distributed ledger on the blockchain. And so this digital representation will, in the case that will interest us here, is the metadata of an object that lives at a place that is not the distributed ledger. And in this case, NFTs are, as their name suggests, non-fungible. That means that they are unique. They cannot be subdivided, in contrast, for instance, to, let's say, Bitcoin, that you can divide them in satoshis. You cannot interchange NFTs, so I cannot interchange my, Nyan Cat NFT for an equal NFT value of, the CryptoPunk number X, Y, and Z. So essentially, the most common feature that we see in NFTs is, well, this metadata that you see here. You have the artwork, and then you have the descriptive information of what the work is, where it lives. We see here the IPFS link and other types of metadata that the creator of the NFT decided to insert. Useful to say here that, well, the way that we represent the NFT metadata is mostly dictated by a specific technical standard that was created for the Ethereum network, so the ERC 721 technical standard that explains what should be there. So one thing that it will be recurring in my presentation is that, well, because this is a technical standard, it was not designed to have any copyright use per se. So this is essential because inserting copyright information in the metadata is absolutely not necessary and quite uncommon, I would say, in most cases. So this is a very big blocker in the rest of our discussions around how NFTs could actually work well with or solve some issues of copyright in the digital world. So how to create and trade NFTs? You have the creator that has this image. They create this metadata, and they essentially send it to the smart contract that say, well, can you please apply my signature to this metadata? The smart contract does this and returns what is the NFT. So the NFT is the metadata of the work with the link of where it lives, with an applied signature that creates the token. Coming back to this specific technical information, well, the smart contract does not check the truthfulness of the metadata, so it means that whatever we put there, it will just wrap it up in an e-signature, so it will not do any other types of verification. And this means that this creates some sort of, I'm going to put it in quotes, truthfulness. So this source of truth that we assume is there, but that we should definitely take with a grain of salt, specifically because the code itself has zero knowledge or authority into verifying any of that information. And also, of course, that the work that the NFT refers to, so the tokenized work, does not necessarily or scarcely ever live on the blockchain, or it is not the NFT itself. So it's a separate digital artifact, and it lives somewhere else on the internet, and there is only a link there. This is an example that, Balash Bodo, my boss, minted. So the ISIS destroyed city of Nimrud, it was minted as an NFT. And here you can see also the description of the token. So this is a custodial NFT. You know, you can mint entire hypothetical ownership rights to a whole destroyed city. This is one interesting example that I found online, where it actually includes the information, the copyright information, conceptual artist pulling an idea out of his head. So it's a little GIF, and it says, well, the sole owner of the copyright in the work, I give the license. So this metadata actually includes the copyright license with its restrictions based on the creator of the NFT, who we hope and assume is also the rights holder. So going a bit further, how do we trade NFT? Well, the essential let's say, claims, narratives, imaginaries of these NFTs, that they will disintermediate the art world, that they will empower artists, etc. All these assumptions and promises are becoming less and less realistic at the time. For no other reason than the fact that, well, all these exchanges have been largely intermediated through platforms that operate both the front end and the back end. So they are decentralized applications that have permission to, well, give you the opportunity to mint the NFT and write on the blockchain, but also become the trading platform where you can exchange as any other intermediary does online. So you have the marketplace operator that becomes this kind of layer between the creators and the smart contracts for the creating of the NFT. However, because essentially these marketplace operators started to operate more and more as intermediaries, they started to, create this also copy norms around what are the originality standards, what sort of copyright license you can put, what sort of content am I allowing to be minted and traded on my platforms? How do I implement notice and takedown regimes, et cetera, et cetera. So they are becoming all the more powerful. Here I am, all the more actually key in the ecosystem, let's say. Here I present this overview of intermediaries. Well, you have the open marketplaces that are the most famous one, OpenSea, for instance, where they permit anyone to mint and trade NFTs. They also are interoperable with other marketplaces. So anything that is featured, for instance, in this collection-based NFTs, where there's a specific company, there is a specific product, there's a specific creator of the NFTs, where they have also the exclusivity to create these collections, but they permit the trading. So I'm free to enter the platform to buy or sell, but I cannot create NFTs, or the curated marketplaces, where there's also this blockage on the entry on who can mint, who can participate as an artist. But all of these marketplaces, they kind of coalesce within the open marketplace ecosystem. And I will move a bit forward to some examples to show how these two platforms interoperate. So, for instance, here we have the terms of service that dictate what can be put on the platform to be sold, but also at the same time we have these copy norms around how we perceive copyright protection, originality, exceptions, and limitations in our platforms. And here we see well, sad frogs, which was a derivative to Pepe items, the famous meme, and the creator of Pepe did create a takedown request, which was granted in the beginning, and then the collection, the creators of the collection contested and actually won to have their collection reinstated as falling under the exceptions of copyright. Similarly here, a more interesting example for me was this company that held this drawing by Basquiat, the Freecom with Pagoda, and they promised not only to create an NFT based on that, but also to permit the person who acquires the NFT to destroy the artwork, which prompted, of course, the reaction from the Jean-Michel Basquiat estate that clarified that, well, even if you own the work, you do not own the copyright related exclusive rights to be able to promise to make such promises. And also, I would say, well, there are moral rights implications to having a work destroyed. And so they did not also hold these rights. And this is why OpenSea actually removed this entry from their platform. This is a very CryptoPunks. I can talk for a long time, but I'm going to briefly give one example that has to do with the interaction between the open marketplaces, the creators of the CryptoPunks, and some derivatives. So CryptoPunks is a collection of NFTs, very famous. They sell for a lot of money. They have reemerged recently with a different scandal that I'm not going to go into now, maybe in the discussions. They have a very strange copyright status because they do come with a license that is created by the company that created them. So there's this type of standardized license around what can and cannot be done with the NFTs, but at the same time, they're traded on the open platform that comes with their own terms of service, or they're traded on the collection-based specific platform that also has its own terms of service. So there is a lot of uncertainty around what exactly we can do with this, who owns a copyright, what we can do with an NFT that we acquire. And the most recent case was, well, a derivative of CryptoPunks was CryptoFunks with a PH, and they created and started trading this product. So the right one that you see on the bluish one is the CryptoFunk, which was taken down by the collection here through DMCA request by Larva Labs, but the collective that runs CryptoFunks actually contested this takedown request because they claimed that their collection is actually parody and esoteric derivative of their original collection. And not only that, when they won, they actually NFT'd the DMCA takedown notice from them. And I will skip a bit further on here to make some final points around the existence of NFTs, going back to my original point around digital scarcity. So we kind of tried to perceive NFTs as this link between how we control the circulation of digital artifacts by synchronizing them with digital copyrights, and that was kind of the promise of the blockchain-based solutions, right? Okay. Okay, nice. I thought I had less time. What we see, however, is that NFTs are becoming a separate layer that that circulates independently of the digital artifact and the copyright that goes with it, but they do not have any legal link with the artwork or with the copyright. So this independence, of course, creates a lot of conflicts, uncertainty, and confusion around what the relationship is between the digital artifact, the copyright, and the NFT. So we need to understand that they are a priori a separate asset class unless we figure out a way to make this connection. But I would argue that even if we do, there is a problem of synchronicity, right? So there's so many different layers, this discussion has been going on for more than 20 years, and I'm not saying anything new, but many have tried to actually, try to code into digital licenses, to digital works, code the legal rights into them. But this is not so easy, because how do you code, difference in jurisdictions? How do you code all the different exceptions and limitations, and their lack of harmonization even within the EU? So these are this is just one level of issues that start to appear when we start thinking about NFTs. And so here we can say that, well, you can create them as a standalone, you can perceive them as a standalone asset, and then you have to address their own issues. So, for instance, how do you address, link rot, where we put a file in the NFTs, but this link might actually die at some point, and what happens to the value of that NFT, or even the validity of it? And how does this standalone asset actually and value creation that it generates through not necessarily the underlying work, but through the the hype that it creates around it? Does this have anything to do, or does it dictate the actual value of the artwork itself, or the value in copyright terms? And I think I will stop here. This is, well, I will stop here to not make to not open the discussion more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. That's great. Again, unless the panelists have any quick queries for Alexandra, are NFTs going to solve all of the problems for all the artists in the world? I mean, promises, promises, promises. With that note, I'll hand it over to Sean for our next talk.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I don't have a slide, and I will explain, hopefully, with a picture, if I may be able to find it, which we can get courtesy of my slow computing speed. That's the wrong page. I apologize, this is not exactly efficient. Everything is going wrong. Never mind. Why is it not sharing screen? Don't worry. Okay. The joys of a new computer means I have the joys of Windows 11, which is somewhat slightly different in working these things. And screen one. I stop here. This should work. Yes, finally. Hopefully you can see a small picture here, which is from the great program comic Piled Higher and Deeper. It is something I've quoted in the past, and you can see. Have I done any of this research? Of course not. Have I written anything? Of course not. Can I do this? Well, caveat emptor. That's all I'm going to say on this matter. Sudden realization that perhaps I should try and work out what on earth an NFT is might have helped for this particular situation. But thankfully, Private Eye comes back to the rescue. This week's edition of Private Eye tells us, and I hopefully you can see this particular picture, meta fashion. You own an NFT, it's just a token. You spend an absolute fortune on something that's completely unwearable, just like normal fashion. So I think there is some aspect of the discussion of NFTs, which is, I think, related here to an understanding, perhaps subtly within normal society, that what we're seeing is some form of techno gibberish that we don't really care about, we being normal people. But it raises, the development of NFTs raises a number of interesting questions, I think, from a property perspective. And this is where I suddenly realize, oh dear God, what am I going to say? I notice, and I suspect this may be the same David Fox, well, the David Fox is amongst the audience, which worries me, as I've just had to scan through a paper of his that he wrote last May, which was cited in the call for evidence by the Law Commission on digital assets, where Professor Fox does give some suggestions of how to deal with NFTs, looking at it from a property perspective. And if my scan of his paper is correct, he suggests that perhaps novation or possibly assignment, but maybe more novation as a method of dealing with transactions in NFTs is the most appropriate system. I think, given time and everything, I will directly address this point. I was going to leave it to the end, but I will address this because the thought came to mind. And I hope Professor Fox doesn't mind me quoting his paper. He says that with regard to novation, he describes it, and this is on page 7 of the short paper he put on SSRN, cited by the Law Commission. Novation is the extinction of an existing contractual obligation by consent and the replacement of it by a newly created obligation. All fine, all good. My immediate thought there is that certainly the Court of Justice in Europe and the federal courts in the States have had some interesting things to say about such a process dealing with digital assets. Notably, the decision in Tom Cabinet in Europe and the earlier decision of Redigi in the District Court in New York. Both of those dealt with what we can describe as second-hand digital asset sales. The Redigi case was attempting to create second-hand transactions over iTunes. Tom Cabinet, of course, was dealing with second-hand ebooks. And both situations said, well, can this happen? Ordinarily, I can buy a second-hand book or a second-hand CD, and principles of exhaustion or fair use say that regardless of the existence of copyright, I now own that asset. I own the book, and the copyright owner cannot prevent me from having that book. Exhaustion, fair use. Same principle. Except that for digital assets, that doesn't happen. As the result of Tom Cabinet, the result of REDIG is that both US federal law and European law does not allow for exhaustion or fair use of digital assets. This is problematic if we begin to think of NFTs as digital assets in that context. And this is, I think, something that will need to be worked out, because under that logic, the fact there's an extinction of an existing contractual obligation and the replacement with a newly created obligation will not get us past the copyright rule with regard to exhaustion and fair use. And I think work will need to be done to try and figure our way through that particular mess. Now, I think, though, one thing that's important to understand is that NFTs are a digital thing, and Alexandra has wonderfully set out quite a lot of aspects of NFTs which have become, in the last few minutes, brand new information to me. So thank you, and also not thank you, because it's having to make me think very much on the hoof. I will sit here and speak here digitally as the sort of a self-declared standard bearer of the materiality of our existence. With all this talk of digitalization, I think a lot of people forget that we still exist in the material world. Madonna's great song remains as important now as it was when it first came out. We are material people in a material world. Everything that you see is goods. And if it's attached to land, it was once goods or could once again become goods. We cannot really see an NFT. The most we can do is see the code as represented on a screen. The screen, of course, being goods. And this is something I've become concerned about, is that discussions about digital assets tend to forget that at the heart or underlying digital assets is the physical reality of the material world and what the implications of that might be. Now, this is where I'm thinking NFTs and their relationship with goods becomes interesting. And I've thought for a long time that there is a potential parallel between digital assets. First, I was thinking of sort of cryptocurrencies, and now we're talking of NFTs. In terms of the relationship, sorry, not the relationship, in terms of the way that certainly English law treats the division between asset value and the asset itself in international sales, in particular CIF transactions, where it's long been held that you can, of course, buy the goods and you can buy the document of title to the goods. Now, this makes me think, and I appreciate that in Professor Fox's paper, he does briefly address the issue here of documentary intangibles, and I think I agree with his outline and the problems there. But I do just want to reiterate that what we see with the law's treatment of asset value and the division between physical asset and asset value is that English law certainly has long been willing to delineate between the two. And the obvious example, as I mentioned, is documents of title. Professor Fox, in his paper at text footnote 3, and this is the as I said, the SSRN paper, which was cited by the Law Commission at text footnote 3, which I'll just hopefully try and find on that. He writes, the link between the paper document and the legal right represented in it in negotiable instruments and the transferability of that right by delivery of the document all depend on the law's recognition of a settled mercantile custom. Yes, that is true. That's what's happened. I would say yes. We also then have to bear in mind, I think, the argument put forward with particular clarity and force by Katharina Pisto in her book Code of Capital, basically that the law, legal institutions, legal systems will try their very damnedest, their very best, in order to generate systems that allow for protection of value, the protection of assets. So on one hand, we might argue that yes, the courts will only recognize mercantile custom. But on the other hand, we might say they are going to recognize mercantile custom where that mercantile custom is reflective of practical commercial reality, where that practical commercial reality concerns massive assetization. And this is my concern here, is that we are going to very swiftly move to a situation whereby NFTs are treated simply as assets because commerce treats them as assets. And that may lead to difficulties, I think, where we have a system which has generated a new proprietary interest or new property right, even a new thing, for want of a better word, but without having a sort of coherent underlying jurisprudence for it. And this seems to be the implication of the Law Commission's work on digital assets. I note the current project relating to digital assets is still underway, and hopefully the Law Commission, I think, is hoping to planning to release their consultation report in the middle of the year. So we're talking a couple of months' time. And there, of course, one of the aspects they will be talking about concerns tokens and NFTs of the sort we're discussing now. I will also briefly note that I think it was yesterday or the day before, the Law Commission published its report on electronic trade documents. And having to very quickly scan through that using the magic of Control and F, I noticed they do mention tokens, though only very, very briefly. And this is a paragraph 6.17, if anyone wishes to look at it in the report. And there they're thinking about the relationship between the nature of tokens in the context of generating an electronic trade document. And they say for their recommendations to be workable, the two components of an electronic document, that is the requirement that the trade document in electronic form must contain the same information as would be required to be contained in the equivalent paper trade document, will likely be fulfilled by the human readable component of the document. So what they're saying is that you're going to have two components of an electronic document, trade document, the metadata, unreadable code, and then its PDF version, if you will. I think the parallel here is the picture and the NFT. Combined together, that's what the Law Commission seems to think is going to be necessary for the singular electronic document. So here we see a slightly different approach. On one hand, we could say the law is going to happily split the two apart in order to deal with the asset value. And at the same time, it will require them to be combined together for them to be tradable. I'm not quite sure what the consequence of this is going to be, but I think we really do just have to wait to see what the Law Commission is going to come up with. Now, I'm cracked on here to 15 minutes, so I'm going to bring it all to an end. And this relates to another one of my unorthodox, blasphemic, unreasoned, angry thoughts. And that is ultimately about digitalization as a means of control. And this is the thing, is whether or not we should think not of NFTs, not necessarily as just an asset, or indeed even as an asset, but as something else, and in particular as a control mechanism, as a means a form of codal control of how we use assets down a chain of transaction. And this is the concern I have, is that whilst we're talking about monetizing NFTs, what NFTs also allow for is the capacity to control that thing to which the NFT attaches. And by control, I mean control its use and potentially control its non-use. In other words, give a method by which the thing to which an NFT relates can be used or not used, turned on or off, as it were, down the chain of transaction. And that, I think, is the more concerning longer term aspect, mainly because we are already seeing this type of behavior occurring with regard to intellectual property rights over digital aspects, specifically software being utilized in goods, being used as a mechanism of control of how we use those goods down a chain of transactions. And given the time, I think I will finish this admittedly incoherent and definitively off the top of my head discussion. I hope it's been of some interest and some value, and I do apologize to Professor Fox for no doubt butchering his elegant article for my own purposes. And on that, I'll finish.
Thank you very much, Sean. I can confirm that Professor Fox is in the audience, and I'm sure he'll have questions later on. But great, thanks for reminding us about materiality and whether that matters. I think I gave that up years ago when I decided to commit myself to doing IP. So I am an immaterial girl. And last but not the least, I'm really pleased to pass the mic to Andres for the final talk in this session.
All right, thanks very much. I'm going to try and share my screen with, hopefully this will eventually work. Don't worry if you see something that doesn't match. Okay, I just need to resize this. 1 second. Tricks of Zoom. All right. Okay, you probably should be seeing the portion of the screen that I want you to see. Don't worry, I'm not going to read 41 slides. It's just placeholder, and I'm just going to try to time myself as well. All right. I'm going to run through this because there is quite a lot to talk about. I'm going to do something slightly different because Alexandra thankfully managed to go through everything, half of my presentation. So I was thankfully great to delete half of my slides so I can concentrate on the nice things. Thanks for introducing the subject in such a great way. I always start my presentations with an apology. I have become a bit known, if you can say it that way, as a critic of NFTs and blockchains in general. Whenever someone posts something on NFTs on Twitter, I bring out the angry panda GIF. I've written a more cohesive, coherent version of some of my thoughts in an article that you can find there, and I'm going to put the link eventually. It's a much lengthier and coherent thing that I can do. I wanted to start with a bit on a story as well. So apologies is that I'm a critic, so everything that you are going to hear has to be seen through the lens of my criticism, or I tend to be a little bit of a critic. I started getting invited to talk about NFTs because this was perfect storm for me. This brings together copyright, blockchains, cryptocurrencies. I've been writing about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies since 2011, published an article in 2014, and published articles on smart contracts, and this brought everything together to copyright. So this was like Christmas and birthdays and absolutely everything, carnivals, everything brought together it's a confluence of my favorite subjects. So I started writing quite a lot about it, and I started getting invited to a few events. To me, the turning point of what I'm going to try to get to you, it happened in April, 23rd of April, 2021, in a conference that I was invited to speak at in Colombia. I was invited with other people to talk about NFTs, and I was introduced like this. We have with us several developers, and to offer some balance, a conservative guy. So I was introduced in a panel full of really bright, young-looking things. You know, I was the old man yells at cloud type of person. You know, I was introduced there to make the younglings look good. So to me, it was so depressed, because I've spent all of my life being everything but a conservative. I've always been the rebel, the outsider. You know, it's like someone had enrolled me on the empire to destroy the rebels and things like that. It was pretty eye opener. So maybe I thought maybe I'm wrong. I'm coming to this from a completely wrong perspective. I shouldn't be such a critic unless I've tried it. So maybe there is something in this that I'm missing out. I've been writing about this for many years, so 10 years, but maybe I was wrong all along. So I changed my personality. Enter Tech Bro Llama. I'm Technolama online. So I changed, I started saying, okay, I'm going to go all in. I put a bunch of money in Ethereum and Tezos and Solana, and started trying to look at the environment. Long story short, I've presented this elsewhere. I actually sold some stuff. So whenever I made my my article available for the first time, when it was still a draft version, I put it up for sale in Rarible, one of the platforms, and it sold. To my surprise, it sold almost in 2 days. I think I probably sold it too cheaply. There are professors in the United States that have sold NFTs worth $60,000, potentially a little bit more. Brian Fry is now a rich man, apparently. But I only sold it for $60 equivalent at the time. So maybe I sold myself cheap. I still have no idea who bought it. So the first version of this article was sold as an. The interesting thing is how I did this was I put the actual PDF file in an IPFS service that is an interplanetary file system, and it's a distributed file sharing or file storage system. And the link was unlocked to whoever purchased the NFT. I think it's an interesting model. I'm happy to have been proven wrong about my criticisms there. However, I sold this for about $65. I spent easily 80, the equivalent of $80 just on transaction fees and gas. So make of that what you will. I also have sold a few pieces of art I can show later during the discussion, but that is not the point now. Now I'm just going to very briefly, because Alexandra introduces fantastically great. This is what an NFT looks like. It is a contract address, a token ID, which is a unique token ID, and the NFT itself is the combination of those two things. This is very important to how we handle this in the future. I think those two, contract address and token ID, that's the NFT. It doesn't need anything else. Sometimes it contains other things like a link to the image and the address to the creator, so that we have this provenance idea that provides scarcity, as it's been explained already. But this is what an NFT is. So I'm just going to bypass all of this. Oh, this is the artwork that I sold. It's I made a bit of a I don't know if it's that interesting, but okay. And I'm just going to bypass that evidence that I sold it as well. It's on the blockchain, so it must be true. So I'll just, this is something that I bought as well. Okay. Complementing a few things that have been talked about. This is my own classification of NFTs from the interest, perhaps, of copyright. And I'm happy if people disagree with this classification. This is my own. I usually classify NFTs in 3 ways. The work itself, the entirety of the work has been uploaded to the blockchain. It's on what is called on-chain. This is very rare, and this is by design. It's very expensive to upload information to the blockchain, and this is to stop people from clogging the system. There are all sorts of technical reasons for this, but it is almost prohibitively expensive. The more you try to upload, the more expensive it becomes. So this is quite rare. The second category that I would define is NFT is a smart contract that supposedly transfers copyright. This is not common either. Some platforms allow you to do that, and they sometimes, there is this tick box that you can see on screen, transfer copyright when purchased. I don't think that that's worth the bits that it's written on. Of course, there are some requirements for a copyright transfer. And the majority, which is the NFT, is just code that is uploaded to the blockchain. So I have some examples for you. This CryptoPunks is an example of on-chain artwork. It's the instructions on how to create one is in the smart contract. So that is supposedly on-chain. All of the hash containing every single CryptoPunk is contained in all of the smart contracts. Also, this called Avastars on the left is also on-chain. It's very low resolution. I'll let you judge the artistic merit of those things. This is an example of a licensed asset. The copyright is not transferred. It's licensed itself. Bored apes are, you're not buying any of the assets, and as Alexandra mentioned that, you're actually just getting a license for some commercial uses. And the most common token is going to look something like this. You have the image, which is only a placeholder. Sometimes it's just a picture, a cropped version, or even a small resolution version of the actual file, which is hosted somewhere else. And then you have the actual contract and the metadata. So this is what most NFTs are going to look like. From an IP perspective, I think that there are a few interesting issues here that some have already been discussed. I'll try to concentrate on the ones that haven't. Things like authorship, what rights are transferred, royalties, licenses, copyright infringement, platform enforcement, and centrality, and potentially moral rights. I've been thinking quite a lot about this aspect because it also brings an element of other things that I've been doing, which is some of the things that I've been writing about, which is artificial intelligence and copyright. I'm interested in this because a lot of NFTs are what is known as generative works. This means that there is going to be some stock character that is going to act as the main character of the entire collection. And then they add all sorts of things. So they add things like glasses, hair, hats, sometimes cigars, all sorts of things. and those are generated automatically. So there could be an argument here that there is not enough intellectual creation that went into the creation of those artworks, in which case all of those works are in the public domain. It would be fantastically ironic to see someone suing for copyright infringement for a Bored Ape that was purchased for $3 million, only for the court to say that this does not have copyright and it's in the public domain. I would find that extremely, extremely funny. So this is a question. It's not answered. It may be very jurisdiction specific. I think I've argued that generative works are protected under copyright, are not in the public domain in the UK. In other jurisdictions, it may change. We have now practice from the US Copyright Office that tells us that those works are not to be registered. Very, very recent decision on this. Then the transfer of rights. We've heard this already, and I'll just repeat it very briefly. When you're buying an NFT, you're not buying any rights. Even if there was supposed to be a transfer of rights, I don't think that the NFT meets the requirements, which is that the transfer has to be in writing and has to be signed. Some NFTs, as I was saying, give licenses. Where I find potentially NFTs have a very interesting use is in the handling of royalties. I think it's one of the best use cases. There can be potentially innovative ways of distributing royalties, which allow users to own part of the work. Some projects are playing with the technology with interesting results. And also platforms allow you to build in royalties that will let you transfer a percentage of the sale. So let's say I post my my drawing that I said I sold for about $15 at the time. That contract has a built-in 10%. So every time someone resells it, I get 10%. This is, however, platform specific, only works in the platform where you created it. It doesn't work in other platforms. This is a good example. This is Jacques. He is a French artist that released one of his songs called Vous. And each second of the song was turned into an NFT. So if I remember correctly, it was 190 seconds. Don't quote me on that, or 191. So each second is an NFT, and he made a pretty nice amount of money, about $150,000 last time I checked. I'm going to go quickly because licenses. It's also a potentially use of the technology. Whenever you buy some of these projects, you are buying a license. Sometimes you're getting a license. Bored Apes is a good example. They're usually really badly drafted. They're contradictory. Bored Apes license particularly is completely contradictory. It doesn't allow you to do some things, but then in the next paragraph, it allows you to do things. So you have personal use as profile pictures, limited commercial rights, etc., or whether you can use it as merchandise. Another interesting potential use is in funding. Or fundraising. This is an image that I found quite interesting. It's a photograph that a photographer took in Hawaii. It became extremely popular online. Everyone was pirating it and using it in their own slides, like I am doing right now. The artist said, "Okay, I'm going to put this as an NFT. If the NFT is purchased for the price that I am saying, I'll put this in the public domain." And she did. It was sold for 300 Ethereum, and now it's in the public domain, so we can use it for free. It's an interesting example. Then copyright infringement. People are minting works that do not belong to them, and I am guilty of that. I've been minting away things that do not belong to me on purpose. I'm not selling them, obviously. I'm not stupid. But things, or Banksy thinks that copyright is for losers. So I've minted a couple of Banksys because Banksy, she's not going to sue me. Banksy is girl. It was my theory. Anyway, is it infringement? Here, this is my very controversial statement. I don't think that necessarily minting a work is infringing copyright. Hear me out. There is no exclusive right to minting a work. So is it publishing? It's not copying, because you need not be copying the work. You're just generating a link to a work, a contract address, and a unique ID. And maybe there could be a communication to the public. You could be linking to the original work. I've done this myself. I minted a SAP replica of Nyan Cat, who had sold for about $1 million, $500,000, $1 million, depending on the exchange rate. And it's exact copy, and it's linking to the original. Am I infringing copyright? I don't know. I don't think so. The other thing that has been happening, and I'll go quickly because I'm a bit over time. If we take 15 minutes. Copy fraud is another interesting subject. It is when you copy fraud is defined as you take a work that is in the public domain and you protect it and close it. This is not forbidden completely. There is only Chile has passed legislation that prohibits this happening, but this is happening all the time. People are minting works that are in the public domain all the time. Again, guilty as charged. I've done it myself. Is it reputational damage for someone to do this? I'll finish with a couple of things. There are two things. There's things that can have an interesting effect, which is called the DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. It's a governance token that people get together and they issue a token that is going to govern a group of people, organization, that can be done with a special effect. There have been some fantastic, spectacular failures. So some people got together to try to purchase a copy of the US Constitution, and they failed because the person that was bidding against them could see what they were doing and bid like $5 more than they were bidding. There is an example of some people got together to buy a copy of Dune's of Jodorowsky's Dune, the actual book, and they thought that they were able to make a movie out of this. They had not consulted a copyright lawyer before this. There are interesting questions here. Is it a co-op? Who owns the assets that are created? I think those are questions. And finally, I'm going to finish with this. The platform enforcement, and Alexandra mentioned this, so just briefly, I think that 90% of the enforcement is taking place at platform level with DMCA notice and takedown procedures. So this is what I call platform is law, sort of playing on code is law. I think that most enforcement is actually happening at the platform level. The platforms are developing quite a lot of power, particularly OpenSea, which handles 80% of the market. And just, I promised I was going to finish there, but I'll finish with this sort of a few statistics that are sobering. This is a study in Nature that looked at the environment, and I find these figures fascinating. Only 75% of assets are 75% of assets are sold for lower than $15. That tracks with my own experience, and only 1% sold for more than $1,500. So Burkhard, don't give up your collectibles, and most people don't make any money, and the amount of people that are actually sharing is very, very, very small. So I'll finish with that. Please stop trying to make NFTs happen. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andres. That was wonderful.